Hey guys, alrighty. So this is the second day this week. The cold is going through the Carp household. My oldest has it now, and she's also awaiting a PCR test, a COVID test. So they won't let her back. So you've got a sub today, and we're going to finish up chapter two with some trig functions, and it's just all memorization. So hopefully, if I go slow enough, you guys can watch and rewatch this, and it's nothing crazy. So you guys are supposed to memorize the derivative of these trig functions. Now, I know most of you just learned cotangent, cosecant, and secant, what they were. So as far as the AP exam goes, okay, this guy, this guy, this guy, and secant are very, very, very important. They're used a lot. These guys, will give it a little eh. Okay, could they be on there? Yeah, for sure. Am I overly concerned with you guys memorizing these by the test? No, I think most of you will, just because you'll do so much of them in the homework. But if you need me to write these on the board for the test, I have no problem with that. So don't stress over the actual derivatives. Just focus on the rules. Okay, so let's just jump in, right? We're going to use all of our derivative stuff we know, except now they're going to have trig functions. So we have y prime is equal to the derivative of x is just 1, and then plus 4, and the derivative of sine right up here is cosine. So you just write cosine of x. That's it. No tricks. Okay. This guy, you have the product rule, right? You have the first function and the second function. Function because both of them have x in it. So this is a function times another one. So we have to use our product rule. So we're going to do first x squared times the derivative of sine, which is cosine, plus the second function, which is sine of x, times the derivative of the first function, which is 2x. Right? So again, product rule, first derivative of second plus second derivative of first. And then you kind of want to clean this up. That just means, you don't need the parentheses. You can write x squared cosine of x plus, let's put this 2x in front, sine of x. And that would be totally acceptable on a test as an answer. Okay. All right, question C, you're going to have to use the quotient rule. How come? Because this is a function of x and a function of x, and you're dividing, which is another word for quotient, right? And so you would do low d high, derivative of sine is cosine, low d high minus high sine d low all over low squared. And again, you just want to clean it up and say that that's x cosine of x minus the 1 goes away. It's just sine x all over x squared. Okay. Hopefully no issues so far. Got another sign. We're really hitting the signs hard. In most tests, again, we'll have sine, cosine, and secant on it. So let's do the product rule on this guy because it's one times the other. So y prime would be first times the derivative of sine is cosine plus the second, which is sine, times the derivative of e to the x, which we know is just e to the x. Okay, now when you simplify this guy, you can see that there's an e to the x in both terms. And so I can factor that out. And when I factor out e to the x, I'm left with just a cosine of x plus a sine of x. And the book will usually write sine first, but it doesn't matter, right? This is commutative, so that's a great answer there. All right, we'll keep rolling here. Quotient rule again. We've got low, 1 minus sine of x, d high, the derivative of cosine, is negative sine of x. Okay. Sorry, we're getting the trash taken out right now. So excuse the noise. So it's low d high, okay, and then minus high, which is cosine, d low. So this is the first time, right? You might get a little bit confused. When you take the derivative of the bottom stuff, the derivative of 1 is 0, okay, and the derivative of sine is cosine, but that negative sign is still there. So that needs to be negative cosine of x. Okay, so that's low d high minus high d low. And if you're confused, you guys, on where negative sine of x came from, right? The derivative of cosine is negative sine. Okay. All right, and then that's all over low squared. Okay. All right. So now we got to simplify this. So what we're going to do is we're going to distribute. I'm going to take this times this guy and this times this guy. So when you do negative sine of x times 1, you get negative sine of x. Okay? And negative sine of x times negative sine of x is positive sine squared x. Okay? Let's pause for a second. This is always an issue based on your lack of pre-calc stuff. You see how that 2 is on the trig function? So when you do that, when you do sine of x times sine of x, or cosine, or any trig times itself, the way that you write that, you guys, is sine with a little 2 right there, x. Okay, that is not the same as sine of x squared. That's bad. Okay, this guy is only attached to the x, and so that's very different than this. Okay, so don't do that. You put the 2 on the trig function. So negative sine x times negative sine x is positive sine squared x. All right, then we've got a negative times a negative, which is positive. Cosine times cosine is cosine squared of x. And that's all over 1 minus sine of x quantity squared. Okay. All right, there is a identity that I've mentioned in class. That doesn't mean that you know it or you remember me saying it. All of that, you guys, is equal to 1. Okay, so don't freak out about that. It's just a math fact. It's like a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If you ever have sine squared plus cosine squared, you can replace all of that with the number 1, because that's what it's equal to. Okay, and when we do that, we get 1 minus sine of x over quantity 1 minus sine of x squared. Those are identical, so one of them cancels, and you're done. Okay, so that was definitely the most work on the front page. As far as simplification, just look over it and make sure that you can follow along with that. And the benefit of this, you guys, you can always rewind. Okay, nowhere near as bad over here. We're just going to do the quotient rule, which is low, so cosine. Low d high. The derivative of e to the t is just e to the t. Low d high minus high, which is e to the t. D low, the derivative of cosine is negative sine. All over, oops, that's a t. All over low cosine squared. And again, focus on where that squared is, right? All right, so when we clean it up, this is, you can take an e to the t out of both terms. It's in the first term and the second. So let's take that out. And what's left? Well, I took it out of there, so all that's left is cosine t. And this is really plus, right, because the 2 negatives. So all that's left here is sine of t over cosine squared t. Now, you guys, that is not the same as this, right? These are squared. That cannot be simplified. You can't cancel a cosine, right? It's stuck together with all that stuff, so we're good. Okay. All right, page 1 down. Let's check out the back. So on the back, I think I'm just going to do the first 2 examples, and I'll do this last one with you. It's particle motion. I kind of want to be live to do that with you to make sure you're kind of following along. Okay, so we've asked this question before. It's important. It wants to know, find all of the points or the x values where the tangent line is horizontal. The definition of a tangent line being horizontal, that's a tangent line that's horizontal. It has a slope of 0. So you write underline definition f prime 0. That tells you need to find f prime. And when you find f prime, it's really easy. It's 1 plus cosine of x. I think that question was on the front, right? X plus sine of x. Similar, but not quite. Okay, so 1 plus cosine x. And we want to know, where is that equal to 0? Okay, and now there's trig. And now I know you guys all get nervous. I get it. So I'm going to do my best to explain it, and we'll just keep working through the issues. If you want to know where this happens, you can move the 1 over, okay, and you get that. The translation of that, you guys, is find an angle x so that the cosine of that x is equal to a value of -1. And we can do that, you guys, on the unit circle. Okay, there is a point right here that is the coordinate point -1, 0. Okay, and this tells me, right, at this angle, you have to know that the angle is pi, right? I know that this is 180 degrees, but we don't do degrees in calc. It's all radians. So this is an angle of pi. This is the cosine value of that angle, and this is the sine value of that angle. So all of this, right, tells me that the cosine of angle pi is equal to -1, and it tells me the sine of angle pi is equal to 0. And you can verify that by typing in a calculator, right? You could do cosine pi if you're worried about it. It will tell you it's -1. If you do sine of pi, it will tell you it's 0. Okay, so the unit circle gives us those values, and now we know that x must be equal to pi because cosine of pi is equal to -1. So whenever we get to these trig things, you're looking for an angle measure. Angles are radians on the unit circle, not degrees. Okay, all right, let's do the second derivative. So the first derivative here from the front page, the derivative of secant is secant x tangent x. But I need the second derivative. Okay, so let's do this. We have the product rule. Two things being multiplied together. So the second derivative is the product rule. First, secant of x times the derivative of tangent. From the front page, the derivative of tangent is secant squared. So first, derivative of second plus the second, which is tangent, times the derivative of the first. Well, the derivative of the first was kind of like our original function. The derivative of secant is secant tan, both of them. Okay, and it tells you that right here. So don't freak out. That's just memorization. The derivative of secant is both, right? The derivative of tangent is secant squared. So all I did is I plugged that in. And if we simplify, hopefully you can see that I have like x times x squared is x cubed. So this is really secant cubed x plus, these are all just multiplied together. It seems like I have tangent squared and then secant. So that is the second derivative of secant. All you guys have to do now is figure out the part you won't like, what happens at the angle pi over 4. Okay, so let's think about what we know at that angle. Pi over 4 radians is the same as 45 degrees. On the unit circle, all of those values are the same. Sine and cosine are always the same at 45 degrees, right around here, here, down here, and down here. Not 45 degrees, we call it pi over 4 radians. All that changes is sometimes one's positive and one's negative. Like down here, I'd have to go right and down, so one's positive, x is positive, y is negative. But in this case, they're both positive. So how can I use that to figure this out? Well, what does this mean? This means take secant of pi over 4 and then cube it. So I'm plugging in pi over 4 for x. Then I need to find tangent of pi over 4 and square it. And then I need to find secant of pi over 4. Okay? It's a lot easier than you think. Now, I know you guys just learned about this. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine because the first letter doesn't match. S becomes the reciprocal of the C function, which is cosine. And so if this is the cosine value right here, it's super easy to get secant because you just flip this. Instead of root 2 over 2, it's just 2 over root 2. Okay? We'll figure out what that is, but we just did secant, so we know it's 2 over root 2. So let's talk about tangent. Tangent of anything is the same as sine divided by cosine. At angle measures of pi over 4, it's really easy because sine and cosine, right, are exactly the same. And so tangent there is that divided by that, but they're the same. So it's just equal to 1. So our answer is going to be this guy cubed. So this isn't calcs. Don't get mad at me. Remember that a over b cubed, you cube the top thing and you cube the bottom thing, right? And so right here, 2 cubed would be 8. And root 2 cubed is root 2 times root 2, which is 2, times another root 2. So it's 2 root 2. Plus 1, you can just ignore, and I have 2 over root 2. Luckily, this reduces to 4, right? And now I have a common denominator. for a final answer of 4 over root 2 plus 2 over root 2 is 6 over root 2. Okay. All right. So in the world of you telling your friends you hate calculus, let me remind you, calculus stopped right here. And if you memorize those trig functions, that usually isn't where people start hating life. They hate it when they start doing this, which is pre-calculus, plugging in angle measures. And then they hate it when they're simplifying algebra, right? That's algebra 2 stuff. And so, just try to keep it real as far as the calculus part. This is the stuff, the pandemic stuff that we're just trying to work through. Okay. Really sorry I couldn't be here, you guys. I'm sure that I will now get sick all weekend and my children will be running around like crazy, feeling great. So it's all good. Have a great long weekend. And I will see you guys on Tuesday when you get back.